All right, hello everyone. I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Translating Vista Service to Your Resume and Career. I'm Calvin Landrum, a training coordinator with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Joining our production team are Rachel and Indy from our partners at Education Northwest. They'll be managing the WebEx technology and will be helping address questions you may have during the session. Leading today's session, we're delighted to have with us Erin Barnhart, PhD. Dr. Barnhart is the founder and president of Effective Altruism, LLC, as well as the director of operations for the American Gap Association. Erin serves on the board of directors for the Building Bridges Coalition, on the Oregon Committee on Volunteerism, and as an online instructor for the AmeriCorps Vista Blend. She teaches a section of the volunteer mobilization course. And she's also an adjunct professor at the University of Oregon and Concordia University, Portland. Erin is also an AmeriCorps and CCC alum, like myself. Today we'll also hear from two other Vista alumni guest speakers, Jordan Catcher and Aaron Pringle, and we'll hear a little bit more from them later. Our goals for this session are that after today you're able to first, effectively translate and highlight important aspects of your Vista service on your resume, identify keywords and language for your resume that resonates with various job fields and sectors, and we also want you to be able to build a portfolio that showcases the experience you gained and work you accomplished during your service. You'll do so much during your service, and it's nice to know how to show that off. We're going to begin today by looking at how you can prepare for a successful transition out of your Vista service. We'll focus on some tangible ways you can highlight and share your service experience, both in person and through your resume. Along the way, we'll hear from two Vista alumni about their personal experiences with this process. Finally, we'll close by sharing some additional resources at the end with a question and answer session. So before I hand this presentation over to Erin, I'd like to share a tweet that was sent to @VistaBuzz last spring. As you can see, even 6 years later, the benefits of serving with Vista continue to manifest themselves. At CNCS, we wanted to learn more, so we reached out to this alum and learned that after her Vista service with adult literacy program, she went on to graduate from school graduate school for public health. Today, she is currently employed as a statistician at a large research hospital. When asked to explain the connection between her Vista service and the career benefits, she says, "I've been asked about Vista in every job interview I've been on. My opinion is that my graduate degree is what makes me qualified for the research jobs that I've taken, but the skills I've gained from Vista may have set me apart from other candidates." Keeping this in mind, I am excited, very excited, that Erin and our guest speakers are here to discuss the best ways to represent Vista service while undergoing a career search and really how to set yourself apart from other applicants. Erin, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much, Calvin.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today for this webinar. I very much enjoyed your responses to our opening chat question. You know, we got to see some of the great common responses like veterinarian and astronaut and president, but we also got some really creative ones, including someone who wanted to be a cat. And the person who wanted to be a cat, you were speaking my language, so you and I are on the same page. Before we dive into our webinar content this afternoon, I would like to ask you guys two quick questions, and you'll see the poll questions on your screen there. The first is, where are you in your term of service? Have you just begun? Are you in the middle? Are you nearing the end? Or have you already completed? The other question is, do you know what you want to do post-Vista? Some of us might know or are pretty sure what you want to do post-service. Some are in the process of currently considering and exploring what you'd like to do. And then there are always those of us who just aren't sure yet. So I'm going to give you just about a minute or so to respond to those questions. In fact, I can see that it's winding up already. So we've got a pretty nice mix, it looks like. Several folks who are early in the term of service, several folks in the middle, several nearing the end. Let's see, scroll on down a little bit there, and know what we want to do. Yeah, lots of folks right in that consideration process. That's pretty typical for this type of webinar. The nice thing is, no matter where you are in your term of service, you're going to find some useful information here on this call today. We're going to talk about some things you can do at the very beginning, things you can do in the middle of your service, as well as many things you can do even if you've already finished. And as far as knowing what you want to do next, it's never too early or too late. So we will spend some time giving you some tools and resources to help with both of those. So, preparing for the transition. First, we're going to talk about what you can do today to prepare for your professional next steps. The first thing we suggest is building a portfolio. Collect things like writing samples, social media posts, program materials, outcomes and evaluations, trainings you've completed, software you've used. Capture this kind of information and keep it all in one place. Effectively what you're doing is building a portfolio of things you have done and completed and learned, and it's going to be easier for you to share those skills and interests and abilities when the time comes. If you've already completed your term of service, go ahead and request copies of these materials from the organization where you served. Chances are they're going to have copies of all of this kind of stuff that you can just go right on back to them and say, hey, I'm building my portfolio, can you send me some materials? The next step in preparing for the transition is to start identifying careers and programs of interest. There's a couple different ways you can do this. One is by starting to track job posts, potential employers, potential roles, and identifying those that are particularly interesting to you. There's an activity I like to share that can be found in an idealist.org guide to nonprofit careers that we're going to give you a link at the very end of this webinar. And the activity means, or rather instructs you to spend time on a site like Idealist or Monster.com, Simply Hired, and just collect any job post that sounds remotely interesting to you. Don't assess whether you're a good fit for it. Don't assess whether you really want to do it. Just literally, if it's interesting, you copy and you paste it. And what you do is once you have, let's say, 25, 30, 40, even 50 of those positions set aside, go through them with fresh eyes and see if you can identify what it is about them that's most appealing to you. You may be surprised by the results. It may not be that you want to work just in one particular career field, but rather you're drawn to roles where you have autonomy, or you might be drawn to roles where you work closely on a team of colleagues as opposed to independently. So that's a great activity for you to identify potential careers and jobs that might be of interest. You'll also want to spend some time thinking about degree programs that might be of interest. And again, if you're thinking about going back to school, think about what potential educational paths might be most useful or most engaging. Another thing that we like to suggest is talking to your colleagues, your peers, organizational partners. Where do they think you would thrive? What do they think that you might be great at? What do they want to do? Try to get a sense for what their interests are, and that may spark something for you as well. And again, when you're thinking about the back to school question, research possible programs and ask for recommendations from informational interviews and colleagues. So speaking of informational interviews, this is an excellent way to identify what you might want to do and to learn more about potential career paths. Ask your colleagues, your supervisor, your friends, your peers, who they know in particular fields or at particular organizations of interest. Take a look at LinkedIn, see who might be connected to something that's interesting. And an informational interview is an opportunity to, over coffee or lunch, ask questions about what they studied, what they read, what you should do to prepare if you're interested in this type of career. You might also ask if they'd be willing to share a copy of their resume. See if you could take a look at what their career path is. There's a lot you can really learn from this type of process, including what skill sets are needed to do particular kinds of work, what does a day-to-day really look like in that type of role, and it helps you assess whether it's going to be a good fit for what you really want to do. You might consider listening to the recording of a webinar I presented last year on the topic of career research. It was titled, Considering Your Career Options, What You Can Do Today. You'll find that on the VISTA site. And actually, it looks like there's a link on the screen there. This webinar covered some of the career research activities like informational interviews that I've just mentioned in even more depth. The last thing on the preparing for the transition here is request letters of recommendation, especially as you near the end of your term of service. Ask your colleagues, your supervisor, your peers, those who have seen what you're capable of, if they'd be willing to write a letter of recommendation and or if they'd be willing to serve as a reference for you down the road. So now we're going to spend a little more time talking specifically about portfolios. You see on your screen here, here's a list of the kinds of things you might collect for your portfolio. So we've got writing and work samples, program materials, accolades and kudos, thank you letters, certificates, lots of different types of information that tell the story of your work as a VISTA member. Keep in mind that your portfolio can be something you create on paper, something that's printable, or something you host online. And you can use a site like WordPress, Google Sites, Squarespace. There's lots of options that are either free or really low cost, and you can create a really professional looking space to capture what you've done and what you're capable of. There's also a really terrific guide for creating your own portfolio, and that's titled VISTA Portfolio Toolkit, Turning Service into a Career. You'll find the link to this toolkit in the chat window right now, as well as on the resources slide at the end of this presentation. So let's talk about translating service to career speak. This is basically the process of best describing what you did as VISTA for a non-VISTA audience. First and foremost, prepare a 1 to 2 sentence description so that you can seamlessly explain VISTA to a potential employer. This is always a tricky part of the process, and as an AmeriCorps alum myself, not everybody knows what AmeriCorps is, not everybody knows what VISTA is, so creating a very brief, seamless way to describe it is going to be an excellent tool in your toolkit. For example, it might say, this is an example for you, AmeriCorps VISTA members live and serve in some of our nation's poorest urban and rural areas. With passion, commitment, hard work, and innovative solutions, VISTA members build capacity by creating or expanding programs designed to bring individuals and communities out of poverty. It's 2 sentences. It basically describes what AmeriCorps does, what your focus is, and how capacity building is really at the heart of what AmeriCorps members do. And you'll see that second bullet point on your screen there is define capacity building. So part of the process here is to learn how to talk about what capacity building is. There's a hint here. Every single field, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, government, educational, needs capacity building. And everyone on this call today, everyone who's done AmeriCorps VISTA work has been in the field of capacity building. So this is a critical step for you to explain how what you've done as a VISTA can be replicated anywhere. So looking at our next screen here, capacity building. Effectively, at its base, it is a set of activities that expand the scale, reach, efficiency, or effectiveness of programs or organizations. That's what you learned at PSO. The tasks and activities related to capacity building include things like create, expand, or strengthen an organization's systems or processes, as well as the transfer of knowledge products and relationships to the staff and volunteers of the host site. Your examples might include an ability to do more with less, leveraging human, financial, and other resources to meet organizational goals. It's developing internal programs and strategies to make the organization more efficient, more sustainable. It's participating in resource development and volunteer engagement, again, to make the organization more sustainable, to be able to do more with less, to engage the community, to meet the mission of the organization. These are the types of things that define capacity building, and these are the sorts of things that you'll want to talk about with an employer, with an educational application process, letting them know this is the type of work you've done, and this is the type of work that's needed at almost every type of organization. So now we're going to spend a little time talking about how to translate your service to what I call career speak. First and foremost, reflect on your service and brainstorm a list of skills you developed, accomplishments and activities you completed or with which you assisted, materials you created, responsibilities you held. Take a look at your position description. Take a look at your day-to-day. What were you responsible for? What activities did you complete? What skills did you develop? Again, what was your day-to-day? What were you responsible for each day? What did you complete? And also, what did you need to know or do to succeed in your role? Consider technical, interpersonal, and characteristic skills. Some examples of technical skills might be database development, community outreach, volunteer management, resource development, community development, project management, and program development. Examples of interpersonal skills could be coalition building, experience working with diverse groups of individuals, experience working across sectors, and characteristics could include things like being mission-oriented, a critical thinker, having cultural competency, being a quick learner, motivated, outcome-oriented, flexible, innovative, and dedicated. These are the sort of terms that you'll use on your resume, that you'll use in job or application interviews. It's a description of your skills that puts them in the context of the workplace. So we're going to do a quick activity here. What I'd like you to do is think about what skills and experiences have you gained during your VISTA service. So I'd like to ask you to enter those ideas in your chat box, and you'll see the visual on the right that shows what the chat is. Make sure you send it to all participants, and we want to make sure they're visible to everyone, so do be sure to put them in the chat panel rather than the Q&A panel further down the screen. So I'm seeing some great examples here. Conflict management, absolutely. Grant writing, patience, coalition building, presentation skills, website coding, data entry, database management, using Microsoft Office, doing resource work, cultural competency with veterans, community outreach, constant contact. As your peers are putting these up on the screen, I highly recommend that when you see something that also relates to you, jot it down. This is a brainstorming process for yourself as well as seeing what your peers are listing, because chances are someone else is going to identify something that also applies to you. So I'm seeing Adobe, social media, professional development, leadership skills, relationship building, graphic design, time management, excellent point, office professionalism, self-starter, working with diverse populations. These are fantastic suggestions and things to capture as you think about how to describe what you did and gained and learned as a VISTA member. So let's keep going with translating service to career speak. One of the other things you'll really want to do here is learn the terms of your desired field or sector. Every field, every sector has its own language. So spend some time researching your specific field or a job of interest. What terms are common in their job posts? Use sites like LinkedIn, idealist.org, usajobs.gov, monster.com, Simply Hired. We'll have more links at the end of the webinar to share with you like those. But go through job posts and see if they use a particular type of language when they describe the work of that job. Seek examples of resumes from people in those fields. What types of terms do they use? Is there a common language to their work? And then ask during informational interviews what language you should know, what particular words you should use. Part of the reason for this is just to become fluent in the language of those particular careers, and part of it is during the application process, it is not uncommon for hiring managers to be looking for those types of keywords. So we want to make sure you have the language for the field correct. And that next step is really to translate your VISTA service to that sector or field language. So how might you describe your skills, experiences, and responsibilities to, let's say, a nonprofit employer? How about a for-profit employer or public or educational organization? We have an example on the screen there, which is pretty much the same skill or activity translated for each sector. What in the public sector they might call community outreach, in the private sector they'll probably call marketing, let me reverse that. In the nonprofit sector, they probably call it community outreach. In the private sector, they probably call it marketing. And then in the government or public sectors, they might call it public awareness. Effectively, those are all the same thing, which is about educating and bringing awareness to the public about a particular idea or product or program or value or activity. But it's a different language used for a different field. So you're going to want to learn what that language is and then make sure that you're using it as you describe your particular skill set. So this time I'd like to introduce one of my colleagues, Jordan Katcher. Jordan is a Vista alumna who served with the Tribal Colleges and Universities Vista team from 2014 to 2016. After her service, Jordan was hired by her nonprofit and currently serves as program coordinator for their Department of the Interior Vista team based out of Beckley, West Virginia. Jordan?
Thank you, Erin. Hey, everybody. So as mentioned, my name is Jordan Katcher, and after college, I joined the AmeriCorps family, where I started my service out on the Mescalero Apache Reservation with AmeriCorps State and National. And then afterwards, I joined Vista, and I served at United Tribes Technical College in North Dakota under a piloted program entitled Tribal Colleges and Universities. And I ended up loving the program so much that I served as the Vista leader for the program afterwards. And so last January, my nonprofit offered me the dream job of serving as program coordinator for one of our larger Vista initiatives with the Department of the Interior. So I now support 65 on-site Vista supervisors located all across the country, including Guam and Puerto Rico. So 3 years ago, I would have never imagined having this opportunity, but AmeriCorps really prepared me and provoked me to reach beyond my limits and continually strive to branch outside of my comfort zone. So, this journey really involved a lot of dedication, networking, and strength, and I wouldn't trade my AmeriCorps service for anything else. When I started thinking about where I wanted to go after my Vista year at United Tribes, I started examining what aspects of my Vista service were the parts that I loved the most. And in order to understand that question, I had to look into my sustainability binder that I was able to create during my service. So this binder really included my completed projects, uncompleted projects, partnerships, past events, donations, and advice for serving at my site. A lot really goes on during your year of service, and so I also used, my quarterly reports, my work calendar, previous emails, and desktop folders to really capture all that took place during that past year and translated that over to my resume. While looking through my sustainability binder, I asked myself, what did I enjoy the most? Was it forming partnerships? Was it bringing awareness through social media, taking part in cultural practices, or recruiting volunteers? And for myself personally, it was kind of basically all of that. I was very fortunate to serve with an inspiring team of tribal college educators that welcomed me with open arms and allowed me to take part in actually making a real difference on campus, which was why I decided to apply for the Vista leader position. So once I knew that the leader position was something I was really pumped up for, I examined the position's qualifications and started to look over my past and current work experience to begin building up a case for why I would be qualified for that position. So once I had a solid framework, I started to dig deeper into what exactly it was that I accomplished during my AmeriCorps service. Especially as a Vista, like what kind of skills and educational occasions did I partake in that would qualify me to lead other Vistas? Not only just for the approval of those accepting my position, but also for myself. Like, was this something I was prepared for? Would it be best for the program to have me as a leader? Sometimes, these kinds of questions can be difficult to answer, but, I find it really beneficial to attempt to step outside of my own mindset and see things through other perspectives. And my sustainability binder really helped with that process. The same would be applicable for other job positions as well. Once you understand what the position entails and you know that it's something that you put your heart into, you can frame your Vista experience around what that employer is looking for as long as it's applicable. Taking on a year of volunteer service is a beautiful thing, and effectively expressing what you accomplished during those 12 months to a future employer is crucial, not only for them to understand what you took part in, but to also bring forth a better awareness of Vista service in this country. Before I took part in the interview for the Vista leader position, I made sure to discuss this opportunity with as many people as I could. I talked to my mom, to my best friends, my coworkers. I really wanted to work on articulating what made me love this program and, organize my thoughts from my head into comprehensible speech. That way, during my interview, I could feel more confident in my answers and also have my list of experiences in front of me for additional resources. So after understanding the position and realizing that I wanted it so badly and coming up with qualifying examples for my Vista service, I felt confident. Not that I would get the position, but that I'd put a great amount of time and energy into this process. So a few weeks after the interview, I was offered the position, and not only was it an immense honor, but I was also ready to fully accept that position. And the same can be said for my current position as program coordinator as well. Your Vista service builds so much for your resume and involves a lot of skills development that employers all over the country are seeking in an applicant. One of our Vista alumni members recently shared that every introduction you make is a potential first interview. So be proud of the work that you're doing and use that to your advantage when talking with employers. Make connections as often as possible, especially if you're serving with a Vista project that involves some sort of component for what you want to pursue as a career. Now, of course, even if we take, all of these steps into practice, we won't always be offered a position. My talk isn't the golden ticket to getting you your dream job, but I do hope that it was worth your time to hear from my own experiences. Be proud of your service and your commitment to helping others, and know that eventually you'll find your dream job too, whether that's through a second year with Vista, through the Peace Corps, grad school, or through a professional career. So I just want to thank all of you for your time and attention, and I want to thank you all for your service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I really appreciate you sharing your perspectives and your experience, particularly talking about the idea of dream job. I wanted to add just a quick 2 cents here on the idea of a dream job, that many of us are lucky to find our dream jobs relatively quickly, and many of us, it takes a little while. So I want to encourage people not to be discouraged and always look at each potential professional opportunity as a stepping stone where you can learn new things, make new connections, and prepare for when that dream job opportunity opens up, you'll be an even stronger candidate for it. So I appreciate you especially talking about the idea of the dream job and being open to it and recognizing that AmeriCorps Vista is and can be an extraordinary place for you to develop those skills and be ready for that type of opportunity when it presents itself. So what we're going to talk about now is crafting a compelling resume. Specifically, I have some tips here I want to give you. The first one is to be specific, share details. Break your service down into skills, experiences, tasks, and responsibilities. Make sure you name the organizations and communities in which you served. Don't just put on, we're going to show you some not so good examples and better examples in a moment, but don't just say, oh, I was a Vista member and I worked with a nonprofit organization. That doesn't tell anyone exactly what you did. So break everything down into small pieces, into very specific details. What did you actually do? What were you responsible for? Who did you work with? Who did you report to? Make sure you have those details in there so the person reading it can really get a full sense of what you did in that position. Be confident. Don't undersell yourself. As a society, we certainly spend a lot of time making sure that we don't toot our own horn. We make sure we're humble. We don't want to come across as egotistical. And certainly that's still true, but this is not the place to be humble. This is the place to strongly and confidently explain what you are great at, how you will be an asset to a particular organization and what your particular strengths are. So make sure that shines in your resume. Wherever possible, seek to quantify your achievements and successes. And what I mean by that is, if you manage the volunteer program, don't just say, I managed volunteers. Say, I managed 300 volunteers. I created 5 new positions. I engaged people at 12 events. Give it numbers wherever possible. Not everyone, but a lot of people respond to quantifiable outcomes. They want to know size and scale, and they want to be able to visualize what it is that you did. So wherever possible, quantify those successes. A great tip that was given to me by my former boss mentor that I still use is create what they call a master resume, which is one document that captures literally everything about your professional experiences in one place. And this thing can be pages and pages long, because what you're going to do with it is use it to customize a specific audience, or sorry, a specific resume rather, for each audience or position for which you apply. And it gives you the opportunity to go through all of the things you've listed on that resume and say, okay, yeah, I had that job where I did specifically event coordination, but this job that I'm applying for is more about community outreach, so maybe I don't need to go into detail on that. It's an opportunity for you to pick and choose what particular skills, responsibilities, and experiences are most relevant. And again, that's what matters most to the hiring manager is understanding how you are the right fit for their job. So use a master resume to capture everything and then you can create specific resumes as you go. And then lastly here, again, tailor your resume so that you can make the best case for you being a great fit for what they need. That's effectively what you're doing with a resume, is sharing what your strengths are, and again, helping to convince the person reading it that you are the right person for that job. So let's look at a couple of examples here, a not so good example and a better example. So here's the not so good example. It's pretty bland, not very effective. It's a really general, vague description. It says you were a volunteer with AmeriCorps Vista in Portland. I volunteered with Rose City Youth, an organization that runs after-school programs for at-risk youth. I managed volunteers, I helped create new ones, and I helped with fundraising and grant writing. Okay, so it talks a little bit about what you did. If I were reading this, excuse me, if I were reading this, I would know that you'd had some volunteer management experience. I'd know that you had some resource development experience. But the word helped isn't terribly descriptive. I don't know how big or small the program was that you worked with, and AmeriCorps Vista, I may not know what Vista is, and I don't understand what that by volunteer. I may think, oh, so you did this 2 hours a week, you did this 10 hours a week. I may not understand it's full-time. So it's pretty general and vague. It's also not targeted for any specific field or job. I can't tell from this what kind of role you might be trying to seek. Now let's look at a better example. This one is still your Vista experience, but now it's going to give a lot more detail. It's a much more effective example because it's going to give us specifics of your Vista service that are explained and highlighted. So this time, we're going to say you were the AmeriCorps Vista volunteer manager, and you worked with Rose City Youth. Okay, so now Rose City Youth is the organization you work with. Now, as a resume reader, excuse me, I understand where you were. The first bullet point here, committed 1 year of full-time national service to nonprofit organizations serving at-risk youth in Portland, Oregon's Northeast neighborhoods. Much better example and description of what this is, full-time national service with a nonprofit. Okay, I get it. Or contributed to significant expansion of organizational capacity via increased volunteer engagement, fundraising, and grant writing. There's that capacity building discussion. I want to understand what you did for the organization. Recruited, screened, and managed volunteers for Rose City Youth after-school programs. Okay, now I know what your responsibilities were. It wasn't necessarily that you just helped. You were responsible for recruiting, screening, and managing them. Here's a quantifiable result. Increase the size of the volunteer program from 25 to 35 active volunteers. Now, on the surface, you may think, yeah, I only grew it by 10 people. That's probably not worth highlighting. It's absolutely worth highlighting, and when you think about it in percentages, that's a significant growth. Make sure that you share that information. You grew that volunteer program, and it was your work that helped it to increase. Designed and led recruitment and outreach efforts for 3 new volunteer positions, social media coordinator, book club facilitator, and fundraising assistant. Again, shows leadership, shows that you have design skills, shows that you managed a recruitment and outreach process. It also shows that you know something about social media, you know something about facilitation, you know something about fundraising because you designed and found the people for those positions. Again, it's a little glimpse into your skill base. And then you participated in internal grant writing and annual fundraising drive. And participated in may mean, yeah, you know what, I didn't lead it, but I played a role in it. But the person reading this is going to say, okay, they didn't lead this, but they have experience in this area as well. This is a much more detailed example. It's translated, it's targeted specifically towards a desired position. It talks about your specific skill sets. It talks about them in detailed ways and quantifiable ways. And as someone reading this, I have a much better idea of what you actually did in your role with Vista than I did on the previous example. One thing I do want to mention is on the website for this webinar, we're going to include a couple examples of resumes so that you can take a look at a couple to see how others have described their Vista service. So keep in mind this particular example, of course, you can see a recording of this webinar after the fact. But I highly recommend that you take a look at those 2 examples again and then take a look at your own resume and spend some time thinking about how can I make this more detailed, more targeted, and make sure I'm translating it so that it makes sense, again, for that audience. So at this time, I want to pass the mic again, this time to Erin Pringle. Erin is also a Vista alumna. She served with Campus Compact for New Hampshire from 2007 to 2010. She stayed in the CNCS family after her VISTA service as a program coordinator for the RSVP and foster grandparents programs, and she's now serving as program director for RSVP in Bismarck, North Dakota. Erin.
Thanks, Erin. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for allowing me an opportunity to talk and share with you today. As mentioned, my name is Erin Pringle, and for my VISTA years, I spent time in New Hampshire with Campus Compact for New Hampshire. The first couple years were at Southern New Hampshire University, and then I was invited to be the Campus Compact for New Hampshire VISTA leader for my third year. Since then, I, like Erin said, stayed in the AmeriCorps family, the CNCS family as program coordinator for RSVP and foster grandparent, and now am the program director for RSVP. I thoroughly enjoyed my 3 years as a VISTA. I managed the community service work study program that placed college students at nonprofit organizations to earn their work study funds, and then help develop and manage a computer literacy program for immigrants and refugees that were recently resettled within the Manchester, New Hampshire community. And I also organized one-time service projects for Southern New Hampshire University students, faculty, and staff. So in my time as a VISTA, like so many of us, I've spent time building relationships with other organizations in the community, and then developing sustainable programs to address critical community needs that would last beyond my service year. I was asked to send in monthly progress reports, keeping track of the number of volunteers I recruited, the number of organizations I built or strengthened partnerships with, as well as any anecdotal information or stories to share about my successes and struggles. I then used that data from my monthly reports to write my semi-annual progress reports. And towards the end of my VISTA service, I attended a presentation very much like this one, and we were told to use numbers and action words, kind of like Erin has already talked about, to describe our work during our year of service. My VISTA assignment description, or VAD, as well as my progress reports, came in handy when I had to sit down and add my VISTA experience to my resume. I honestly could not remember every little detail about my service, but I could pull numbers and accomplishments from my progress reports and use my VAD to find action words to describe the responsibilities of my position. So instead of a bullet point saying managed community work study program, I can now say recruited and placed 25 college work study students in 12 community partner organizations focused on addressing critical community needs. So once my resume was written, I asked several friends and colleagues to review it. I wanted to make sure that all spelling and grammar errors were identified and that the message I was trying to convey was clear and understandable. Once it was ready, I used my resume to update my LinkedIn page with my VISTA experience. This is a great tool that not everyone thinks about. Organizations can search through LinkedIn profiles to recruit candidates they think would be a good fit for their open positions. I also sent a message out to my contacts to let them know I was job searching. I received a couple referrals to job openings that friends thought I might be a good fit for. I wish I could say that I was offered and accepted the first job that I applied for, but I can't. The job searching process can be incredibly stressful sometimes. So to prepare for interviews, I found it helpful to talk about my career goals and what I wanted out of a job with my fellow VISTAs, my friends, and colleagues. I also researched common interview questions and brainstormed my answers. I didn't want to sound like I had a canned answer, but as someone who needs time to think and process questions, the extra time to think ahead and practice my responses was helpful. The practice also helped me see where I had skills that could be transferable to other positions. For example, I had experience advising students as they planned community service projects. While advising isn't exactly like supervising, I could make the case in an interview that the skills I gained as an advisor are similar to the skills required to supervise staff. I found out as I was interviewing that not everyone is familiar with AmeriCorps or VISTA, so I had to take some time to think about how to describe it to people. I ended up saying VISTA stands for Volunteer in Service to America. I was a full-time volunteer working behind the scenes to develop sustainable programming to address poverty in the United States. I would then go on to explain what I did during my service year. I am sure that you're doing and accomplishing some extraordinary things during your VISTA year. If I could share any nuggets of advice, it's this. Use your VAD and progress reports to help you describe your VISTA service on your resume. Utilize your network or resume and cover letter feedback and proofing, as well as interview preparation. And find a way to describe VISTAs that is natural and comes easy to you. All of these steps will help you be better, or help you to better share your national service story during your job search. So thanks again for all you do to make our country a better place to live, and good luck. Back to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Erin. Again, you know, I love hearing your perspective and hearing what you're up to these days, but also thank you for sharing what your process looked like, what your journey has looked like, as well as offering some encouraging words that, yeah, this can take a little while and you may not get the first job you apply for, and that's okay. That's pretty normal. So, you know, keep at it. Make sure you talk about your VISTA service, share what you did, and you're going to position yourself well for finding the right role that's going to be a good fit for you. So thank you so much, Erin, and thank you again, Jordan, as well. So before we move on to resources, next steps, and questions, I want to very briefly touch on cover letters and interviews. Cover letters are your opportunity to introduce yourself and briefly make the case for you why you are the right hire for them. So to help make the case, plan to briefly introduce what VISTA is and what your role is and or was within it, in addition to the experience you bring to the position. Remember that active language we use for your resume and use similar strategies here. Make sure you talk about what your strengths were, what your responsibilities were, what your skills are. Use those action terms that aren't vague, but rather specific and focused. Be sure to highlight your most relevant skills and strengths as they relate to the specific position for which you're applying. And I'd say you're most relevant on purpose, because one of the things that can be tricky about a cover letter is the rule of thumb is that it really should only be one page. And to keep it to one page, we need to be very spare and focused with our language. And sometimes it means we can't tell the entire story. And honestly, in most cases, we really shouldn't tell the entire story in the cover letter. One of the biggest mistakes I see with cover letters is applicants using that limited space to explain why they want the job and why it would be a good fit for their personal and professional goals and aspirations. Now, while that's certainly important, you need to remember that the reader is most interested in learning how you would be a good fit for them. They want to know why you're the right person for their goals and aspirations, their organization's needs. So make sure the tone and content of your letter makes this case first and foremost. It talks about what you're great at, but relevance is the key there. Make sure that it's connected to the specific position. What skills and experiences you have that are most relevant for them, why you are the right fit for them. That's the case you really want to make with your one page that you have. For interviews, I recommend choosing a few examples of relevant experiences in advance. Pick some stories from your VISTA experience, as well as other professional experiences that are most relevant for the position at hand, and then practice how you might tell them briefly and professionally. You can try that out with friends, with colleagues, with fellow VISTAs. You can potentially even do that with an informational interview, depending on how informal or comfortable you are with that person. Similarly, pick a few talking points, for example, that elevator pitch of how to explain VISTA and your role within it, and practice those in advance so that you can answer questions succinctly and with confidence. The old idiom that practice makes perfect is true here as well. Unless you're really good on your feet, and most of us aren't as good on our feet as we think we are, spend a little time practicing. How would you describe your VISTA experience? How would you describe your strengths and how you are the right fit for that role? Interviews are oftentimes our first and perhaps only opportunity to really make the case for why we're a good fit. And it's the chance for you to explain further what you wrote in your cover letter and your resume. So practice, be ready, have those talking points on hand, have some stories chosen in advance, and again, the opportunity to really shine and show them how your strengths and your VISTA experience in particular has amplified what you're capable of and how you're the right fit for that role. So we're going to talk briefly now about resources. We've talked about many different types of resources on the call today, so we're giving you a list here. You'll also find this list on the VISTA Campus recording page for this webinar. So if you're ready to start looking for jobs or even start doing that research for identifying potential jobs of interest, you can start with sites like the VISTA Job Board. Depending on the sector of interest, you also might want to explore sites like idealist.org for nonprofit careers, usajobs.gov for public careers, and in the for-profit world, there are sites like Indeed.com, SimplyHired.com, Monster.com. These are just a few of many in all cases. One resource I especially recommend excuse me, if you plan to pursue work in the nonprofit sector, idealist.org has a sister site or a sub-site, I guess, called idealistcareers.org. And they have a free downloadable guide on their site called The Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers for First-Time Job Seekers. You're going to find that, I believe it's still on the homepage of idealistcareers.org. And this is a really terrific resource. I'm admittedly biased. I used to work at idealist.org, and two good friends of mine were my colleagues at the time who wrote this guide. But it has a ton of really useful information in there on resumes, cover letters, informational interviews, how to look for jobs, activities like the one I described earlier, and it's free and downloadable online. You can download just specific chapters or the entire guide. For those of you on the call who had a significant professional experience before you came to VISTA, there is another version of this guide called the Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers for Sector Switchers. And we can make sure to get that link to you as well. I believe there is a downloadable version online for that as well. If not, it will be available in libraries and or bookstores, but it's worth looking for because it's about how to translate existing experience into nonprofit speak. So those are both really terrific resources if you're specifically looking at nonprofit careers. But honestly, even if you aren't, I would still check them out for the chapters on cover letters, interviews, informational interviews, resumes. There's some really great tips, suggestions, and activities in there to help you prepare. I use it myself still to this day. If you are thinking about education next, one of the resources I would recommend is, again, on Idealist, they have a list of grad fairs that they host around the country. The programs that participate in these fairs specifically have careers or are focused on a career path that benefits the public, from international affairs to social work to environmental sciences. You might also explore the listings on Princeton Review, where you can search by a specific type of program, a specific school, specific regions. There's going to be a lot of information for you there to research what potential programs might be a best fit for you. And then lastly, I'd like to draw your attention to some of the previous webinars hosted by VISTA, all of which you can access online, and you can see the link there on the screen under Transitioning from VISTA. VISTA has hosted several webinars on topics related to today's discussion, including how to apply for federal jobs, how to use your education award, and preparing for life post-VISTA. So all of those, there are recordings of them on the VISTA campus site, and I highly recommend you check some of those out. There's going to be some additional tools, resources, and suggestions that I think you're going to find really useful. So next steps. Depending on your answer to that poll at the very beginning, if you are still in service, what you can do right now is start building your portfolio. Think about whether you want it to be something that's like a paper or in a binder, for example, or something you want to host online, and start collecting and building that information now. Start researching jobs and degrees of interest. Some of the activities I talked about earlier, like collecting them and then going through them and seeing what comes out. Talking to people, what they see your strengths are, asking them what they would like to do. And start doing informational interviews now. It is never too early or too late to do informational interviews, and I cannot say enough good things about doing these. I have made so many friends and colleagues just by reaching out to people saying, hey, can I have 30 minutes to 60 minutes of your time to ask a couple questions about your role? There are people I met through informational interviews that years later I still count as colleagues and peers. So do those now, and honestly, most people will say yes. Most of the time when they say no, it's because they're just too busy, not because they don't want to talk to you about what their work is. So you're just beginning, work on that portfolio, research jobs, and start with the informational interviews. If you're close to finishing already, do all of the above, plus start requesting letters of recommendation. We saw a question earlier that someone was asking about, should you just get letters from your supervisors, or should you get them from professors or previous supervisors or other people? I would say ask for letters of recommendation from anyone who can speak to your strengths and abilities. You may not use them all, but it can't hurt to have them on hand. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of places may not need a letter so much as they just need a reference they can contact. So anyone who you know who is going to be able to speak to your abilities, make sure you ask them, hey, would you mind serving as a reference for me? Should I apply for a position that makes sense? So ask those questions now. You can do that while still in service as well, but collecting letters, I would probably wait until close to finishing because they're going to be able to speak the most to your abilities. Now, those of you who are on the call who have already finished your VISTA or are just at the finish line now, do all of the above. It really is not too late to start now. Go back and ask for examples of things for your portfolio. Start the researching jobs piece now. Considering degrees, do that now. Informational interviews, again, that's an always type of thing. And then asking about letters of recommendation and serving as references, you can do those now as well. So not too late. Go ahead and get started and try to have fun with this process. This is about identifying what you love and what you're great at and where you're going to be a good fit. And your VISTA service should have prepared you, and the skills and experiences you've had as VISTA really are transferable. I can't say that enough. Everything you guys are doing as VISTA members now is needed in pretty much every field I can think of. So what you need to do is just help them make that connection. So with that, I'm going to transition the microphone back to my colleague Calvin, and I believe we're going to move into the Q&A session. So Calvin?
Yeah, thanks. So you're right, we are going to move into the Q&A, but before we do, we really want to take a second to know what everyone's thought who is on this webinar today. On the right side of your screen, you're going to find a quick poll where you can share your feedback about this webinar. So if you would, please take a moment to answer the questions. We really like to be able to improve on these webinars, and your input really, really helps us. We take a lot of time going over all of these reviews and looking at them so that we can, be constantly improving the quality of our webinars. We do this all for you guys, so we really want to know what you think and what would make this better. So we've given you a lot to think about, and now it's time for your questions. So you can ask questions using the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. And I'll also now ask our operator, Dory, to let you know how to ask questions by phone.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star, then 1. You will be prompted to record your first and last name. To withdraw your request, press star 2. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, press star, then 1 now.
All right, and while we're waiting on people to join us on the phone, I'll go ahead and we can take a couple questions from the Q&A. Let's see, we have a question from Kristen Keys. It says, requesting letters of recommendation, do we keep them or are they sent directly to a school or organization? It's an excellent question, Kristen, and really it kind of depends on where you're applying. Think about when you applied for AmeriCorps, those are reference requests sent to the person that you chose. Some places will ask you to send in the letter of recommendation, which means it goes through you first. It may not be a bad idea to ask someone, for just a general letter of recommendation so that you can always have it on deck whenever you might need it. I don't think there's really one way to answer that question. So it's going to vary, position to position. Let's see, we have Giselle asked, do we have access to sample resumes and cover letters? So this entire presentation is going to be posted on the VISTA campus with these examples, and I believe we also will be posting the resume, I believe, of Erin. I think she gave that to us to post on the VISTA campus also, so you guys can take a look at that. Let's see. Oh, I have a question for you, Erin B. I know you've taken a look at people's resumes and things. We seem to get a lot of questions about, people wanting to know, oh, I've always heard that my resume should only be one page, or, never over 3 bullet points, or, how do you balance? We have a question from Shalani that says, how do you balance being detailed and descriptive while also being concise? Erin, do you have any advice for that?
I do, yeah, that's always a challenge, and it's something I've struggled with myself. I glanced up at the queue while I was talking, and I saw someone who had a great response who said, yeah, the rule of thumb is 1 page for most people, 2 if it's a really senior position, and that is pretty normal, that it can be a little bit longer when you've had years and years of experience, but particularly early in your career, it should be 1 page whenever possible. And part of that is simply because, especially if you're applying for a position where lots of people are applying, you don't want to give the person reading them a reason to say, nope, too long, forget it. You want them to read and you want them to be concise. So this is where being specific and choosing the most relevant details is important. So create that master resume, which will probably be more than 1 page. And then when you're applying for a specific job, go through all of the bullet points under each role and pick out the ones that matter most. Now, if you spend most of your time doing something that isn't as relevant, still give it a bullet point so that it's clear what your role was, but then focus the rest of the bullet points, tailor them rather to the role that you applied for. So it takes a lot of editing, it takes a lot of practice. You play with the margins a little, not so much that all of a sudden the margins are up against the walls and the ceiling, because they'll notice that too. Make sure it's a font that's still readable. So work within the confines of what it should look like, but you really do want to get it down to 1 page, but that detail is really important. And hopefully what you saw in that example we shared of the better resume example is that you were able to give a lot of detail still pretty briefly. Now that one I built out specifically because I wanted to make sure that you could see every possible way to describe what a role could look like. But you could still get it down to 3 or 4 bullet points, but each one of those, instead of saying helped with volunteer management, can say recruited, led, and managed 52 volunteers. That's 1 line on your resume, and it gives a lot more information than saying helped manage volunteers. So err on the side of detail, err on the side of relevance, but do try to stick to what is a U.S. cultural rule of thumb, which is a 1-page resume.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll speak a little bit, add on that. I have a really hard time keeping my resume short because I really like to talk about myself, as I'm sure most people do. I like to give all the full details, and I also have a master resume that is about 3 or 4 pages long. I mean, it's got every single job I've ever had on there. If not for, applying purposes, just for reference purposes. I know I'm sure people out there have applied to jobs where they ask you to input every job you've ever had over the last 5 years, or, list every job that you've had. It got brought up in the chat, about applying through USA Jobs, and how those resumes, they are really long. It's great to list every single job you've ever had on USA Jobs. When you're going in and building that resume and really spelling out everything that you did in that position, kind of no matter how small you might think it might be, that could be the one thing that they're looking for, that really lands you that job. So yeah, I'm really bad at taking that advice and keeping it down to 1 page, but it can be done with some careful editing. I'm going to go ask Dory if we have anyone on the phone with questions.
At this time, we have no questions. Once again, though, if you would like to ask a question, please press star then 1 and record your name.
All right, thanks. So while we're waiting, if anyone wants to, join in on the phone, please give us a call. But we'll answer a couple more from the Q&A and see what we've got in here. Let's see. If we are in our 2nd term of service as a VISTA, do we already have non-competitive eligibility from completing our 1st term of service, or does it not start until after we finish our 2nd term? I saw a couple other questions about non-competitive eligibility. And just as a reminder, we have a full webinar that is all about non-competitive eligibility. It tells you everything that you need to know about that, and goes into way more detail than I can give you right now. So do check that out. What I can tell you briefly is that non-competitive eligibility, it's a little tricky because it's a little subjective. You're able to, so your non-competitive eligibility starts at the end of your 1st year of service. You can apply for jobs, after that, let's say you did 2 years of service, you're able to apply after your second year, and say that you still have it. It's up to your employer to determine whether they would like to extend that non-competitive eligibility or not. Again, like I said, it's kind of subjective. There's a little bit of flexibility in it to say, hey, I did 2 years of service. This eligibility was good for 1 year. Will you, count this for after my second year? Again, it can be a little tricky. It's explained very well in that webinar that we had. So definitely, please take a chance or take a second to go look at that one. Let's see. Someone asked if this will be posted. It will. This entire presentation will be posted here in about a week on the Vista campus, along with all of the resources that we've mentioned. Let's see. I know a couple of our speakers here today have gone to graduate school. They want to know, do you have any tips on how to use Vista to get into graduate schools? I'm interested in hearing maybe from Aaron P. or Jordan, or even you, Aaron B. You've got a lot of education. So maybe how did you guys translate your Vista service? How did that help you with school and getting in?
Well, this is Jordan, I can take that one. I'm in my role now, but I applied for grad school in the early part of spring, and I applied to the University of Oregon, and I was accepted, and I began school this fall. But it's interesting because my Vista service is actually what helped me decide what I wanted to pursue for school. I kept thinking about going into the academic realm and seeing what that would look like, but the more that I invested myself in national service, the more that I realized that community development was really my biggest passion. And so when I was applying, I kind of looked for a program that was very similar to the Vista model in and of itself, very hands-on, experiential. And so when I applied, I really just highlighted on, why did I want to go to that school and what did I think that degree would help with after graduation. And so, tying in the experiences that you had with Vista, even if what you did during your service doesn't exactly align with what you want to pursue for grad school, there's so many skills and opportunities that you experience through your service that can help you to kind of tie in with where you want to go professionally in school. And so that's kind of how I did it. Did anybody else, the two Aarons, have any input too?
Thank you. That was a great response. Yeah, I would just second that talking about highlighting what you did in your Vista service, making the connection to the particular program or the field that you want to study, helping them to understand that, yes, this is the work that I did, this is how it prepared me. Actually, let me reframe that. There's sort of the two ways to approach it. One is this is how it prepared me to do the work of graduate school, that I can demonstrate independence and strength and patience and flexibility, all of which I can tell you are needed in grad school, but also just content specific, if you can make the case that, yes, I worked with this particular community, which helps me to understand that I need to know more about X, Y, Z. So I would agree with everything you said, as Vista really does, you talk about your Vista service, and it really does in many ways prepare you for what you're going to do in grad school as well.
Well, thank you guys for answering that. I appreciate it. So we have another, well, actually, I'll ask Dory if we have anyone on the phone.
We have no questions at this time.
All right. Cool. So we have another question in the Q&A. Tina Foster asks us, how do you organize your master resume? And the good thing about that is that it's completely up to you. I can tell you that my master resume, I go in, I just throw things on there. If I say, oh, I forgot I did that, I go in, I add it under one of the jobs I have. Mine's just listed in chronological order from most recent all the way down to the oldest job that I have. And I just keep one master kind of Word document that just I just throw things on. It's kind of ugly at this point. All the formatting's messed up, but it doesn't really matter because it's not for anyone else really to see. It's all for you, and it's for your personal reference, and just so you have a really great document, that you can pull lines from, and you can pull, all of the dates and the supervisor information. I mean, how many times have you guys been filling out an application and ask you for your supervisor's contact info? You're like, I have no idea. I don't remember what that person's phone number was from 8 years ago. But if you find it once, you can put it on your master resume, and you always have it on there. So that is, it's totally up to you how you organize it. It's really a tool for your reference. Let's see. Bridget Reynolds says, how far back should you go on your resume with jobs? Again, I think it's going to depend on the job and what is relevant to that position. If you did a job 2 years ago, that is going to be relevant to whatever you're applying to, I would add it on there. If it's not relevant, I usually, I don't add the things that aren't relevant to the experience or to whatever position I'm applying for. Again, my master resume has most jobs that I've ever done. So if I, did something all the way back in 2008 and it's directly applicable to whatever I'm applying to, I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to say, I did this, 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 and this is how it ties in to the position that I'm applying for and into the position that, that I'm trying to get to.
Calvin, this is Erin. One thing I would add is I have actually heard a guideline that, in addition to, I agree totally agree with your answer that it should be about what's relevant, but I've also heard a guideline before that if it's more than 10 years back, it may not need to include that. Most employers are interested in the 10 most recent years of your resume. So take that with a grain of salt because I've heard it as a guideline. It's not a rule of thumb, but I've heard that in a couple places before as well.
Oh, excellent piece of advice there. And I think I would agree with that. It's like, think about where you were 10 years ago, and, is that really, maybe you were just getting started and maybe didn't have too much responsibility, and now, for most people working in their VISTA project, if it's a small organization, you have way more responsibility. You are really having to be independent on tasks and projects, and these are all great things that you can play up and say, I did this on my own, I managed this entire project, I coordinated this, I led this team, and yada, yada, yada. All right, so I think we are just about out of questions. I'm not seeing any more here that we haven't covered. Let's see. Emily Aert says, I've been getting interviews but struggling with landing a job. Any words of advice or encouragement? I'm going to ask this question of all three of our speakers. So Erin B., you got any words of advice or encouragement for our visitors out there struggling with landing a job?
I absolutely do. First and foremost, hang in there. I know it's hard. I know it's discouraging, but everyone has been through it. It's not just you. It's not you, it's them situation. Everyone's been there. There's a couple of ways that I talk about when I work with students and VISTA folks, or anyone really, when I talk about looking for a position, there's sort of two pieces to the puzzle. One of them is the window of opportunity, and one of them is being ready when that window opens. The window of opportunity we can't control for the most part. We can keep our eyes open at all times. We can build our networks through things like informational interviews and going to networking events and trying to build our connections so that other people have their eyes open for us too. But that's pretty much the most we can do. Otherwise, the right job opening up when we're looking for one, a lot of that's luck. But what we can control is that when we see that job open up, we can control how ready we are to apply for it. And that's where I highly advise folks that if there's a particular field that you want to work in, do everything you can to be ready for it. Read what you need to read, consider what you need to study, make the connections that you need to make. Look at every role in between you and whatever your dream job might be as the opportunity to become an even stronger candidate for it, especially if you're early in your career. I work with so many students who are coming straight out of school think, I have to land my dream job first or I'm just not going to make my career. Like, what's the point if I don't land the dream job right away? And the thing I try to advise with that is to recognize that dream jobs are, again, you can't always control when they show up, but also you may need more experience before you're ready for that. So don't be discouraged by the fact that I might be needing to apply for different types of jobs first. I once had a student who really wanted to work in international development working with youth. And she had an awesome resume. She'd spent time abroad. She just finished her master's degree, but what she didn't have was in-person contact time working in a youth development program. So she ended up taking a job with Boys and Girls Clubs on the East Coast, and what she ended up doing was doing that for a coach. I believe she's still at that job, and she realized, oh, I have a gap on my resume. I need to get a job where I fill that gap so that when the next job opens up for international youth development, I'm the stellar candidate instead of the pretty good candidate. So think about the types of jobs you're applying for. Is there a way for you to rethink where you're applying? And maybe something where you're like, yeah, this isn't the sexiest career, this isn't exactly what I wanted to do, but you know what, it's going to help me develop skills, I'm going to fill a gap on my resume, I'm going to build my network, and it's going to prepare me for the next one. And also, you know, don't give up in the meantime. Try not to be too hard on yourself, that it really is a tough process for everyone. And just keep plugging away at building your strength as a candidate. The other thing I would say is I know it takes a lot of work to apply for stuff and it can be a little soul-crushing, but do it anyway. You never know who's reading your resume and who's paying attention to what your strengths and skills are. The job that really launched my career for me was working with Idealist.org, and I got that job because I applied for a job at Portland State University, and someone on the hiring committee said, you're not the perfect fit for what we're hiring, but I know someone at Idealist who's hiring, can I pass your resume along? And I thought, oh, sure, and then I secretly thought, no one ever does that. Why on earth would they try to help me out? They don't know me. They sent my resume along, and I got hired, and it launched my career, and it ended up being one of the best jobs I've ever had. So do it anyway. Apply, spend the time. You know, you may be thinking, oh, I can't do another one. Go for it. It's great practice. You never know who's reading it. And every opportunity is a potential opportunity to open another door.
Oh, thank you so much. Excellent advice. What about you, Erin T?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I totally echo everything Erin already said, but one thing that was helpful for me when I was going through, because applying and interviewing is so soul-sucking, but a lot of places will offer feedback after your interview, and I found that helpful to learn about why they chose someone else, because I always was found out like, well, you're a second choice. So that's really great, except I wanted that job, and so they were able to give me some feedback about, okay, this is where we were kind of hoping you'd have more skills or more experience. And so if they offer feedback on your interview, I would take them up on that, because you can learn more. And like Erin said, you might find you have a gap somewhere, and how can you fill that gap so that the next time you apply for that job or something similar, you have it and you're the first choice next time.
Totally. Thank you. And Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those responses were great. You know, I had a fellow VISTA leader that ended up applying for so many positions in her last 2 months, and she was really stressed out and, you know, just kept getting more rejections. But, you know, eventually she ended up getting this really incredible position, and I think it really comes down to, you know, not beating yourself up every time you get a rejection, but just understanding that you have the ability to perhaps get feedback for that position, like Erin was saying, and you just have more of an opportunity to figure out, you know, what are you qualified for, and like Erin Barnhart was saying, you know, having that preparation, like as soon as you find a position that you think, you know, would be beneficial for you and for that organization, put as much research into it as possible, and just give it 100% every time. And it can be exhausting. Like if you keep getting rejections and you're like, this sucks, it'll be okay. And eventually, you know, you will get to a position where it is the right fit, both for you and for that organization. Definitely. All excellent advice. Thank you, Emily, for this question. What a wonderful way to end this webinar.
And I guess my advice / words of encouragement are, you know, again, that window of opportunity. You know, I can speak from personal experience that I've always, you know, and I realize it's also a very privileged statement to make, but I've always been able to move at the drop of a hat. So I started working here in DC with one program. A job opened up in Austin. Someone said, hey, Calvin, are you interested? I said, yeah, sure. So, I moved to Austin, and then 6 months later, my job opened up here, and I was able to had to move back to DC. So I moved across the country 2 times in 1 year, but I landed in a position that I'm really happy in, and honestly, I can say this is one of my dream jobs. I really love what I do. So it's really, taking those opportunities and just going for it. One thing, my mother always told me is, jump and the net will follow, and I really try to take that to heart. And if I'm feeling nervous or scared about something that I want to go after, you just kind of go for it and you'll figure it out because you don't really have any other choice but to figure it out. And my other word of advice is to kind of be shameless. I have no shame when it comes to asking people for advice or to read things, asking people for a job, saying, hey, do you know if you're hiring? I heard this position's opening up. How can I be considered for it? What are you looking for in this job? Do you think that I'm qualified? I mean, really, just have no shame. I mean, sure, people might say, no, you're not qualified. No, we're not interested in you as a candidate. Sorry, I don't have time, but that's fine. I recognize that, that's them and not a reflection of yourself. So really just, be shameless and go for it. And I think that's my advice. So thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to our guest speakers. We really, really, really appreciate it. Before we leave for good, we do want to give you some information about our next webinar that's coming up. It is on creating group volunteer opportunities that engage and inspire. This webinar is going to be on June 29th, 2016. If that sounds like something you're interested in, or if you enjoyed this webinar, please attend. It's going to be, again, at 2 p.m. Eastern. So we'll see you there, and thank you, everyone, so much for joining. Have a great day.